Alright, so in typical form, your leftist types either don't watch a clip in its entirety or just fail to understand what is being said, or they just misconstrue what is being said for probably political reasons, as this article does here, saying that all Art Laffer was basically saying was that low-wage employees aren't worth $15 an hour. That's really all you got out of it? He said a lot more than that. What he really was saying was that you have a lot of groups of people that would be hurt by a $15 federal minimum wage. People without an education, people without experience, job training, certain minorities. Now, I am going to assume that he's talking about specific minorities in the inner city, which would make more sense, right? There's a serious lack of opportunities in many of those Democratic strongholds. It wouldn't make any sense to say that about Japanese Americans, for example, that do quite well. Now, this is twisted and misconstrued by those on the left, and they try and make it seem like he's saying something about their worth as humans, or by the mere fact of being a different race, they're somehow not worth as much. Now, I've said this before, these leftists have two options. They either just didn't actually watch the whole thing, or they're incapable of understanding basic reality. It could be both. They're not mutually exclusive, because he plainly says near the end of the clip that the federal minimum wage would hurt these people. It's fairly clear that he's saying don't implement that minimum wage, as it will hurt those who you think you are trying to help. As most people who care to look it up knows, minimum wage has a pretty heavy racist history behind it. Early on, a lot of racist white people pushed for a minimum wage increase for minorities specifically, for black people. I would have argued against it at that time because I can recognize it for what it is. They were simply trying to price them out of the market. Your typical leftist would have been in agreement with those racists. Maybe not because they are racist, but because they really think it's going to help. Meanwhile, those real, actual racists would have been sitting back smiling as the leftist do-gooders does his bidding, because they don't know their econ. They don't seem to understand how reality works. Yeah, push for that minimum wage increase. Thank you for agreeing with us. You think you're helping those minorities by advocating for a minimum wage. Meanwhile, we're advocating for a minimum wage because we know it will crush them. No one is going to hire them for that much. They don't have the experience or the education. So leftists are simply on the wrong side of history on this one. So it's odd because Laffer here is arguing precisely against the policies that those old-timer racists wanted because they knew it would throw a wrench in the black community. Laffer is saying don't do that. But he mentioned minorities and a list of several other people that would be hurt by this, but the leftists just focus on him mentioning minorities and then throw the word racist around, while not addressing the reality of the impacts their desired policies would have. I've seen this happen many, many times with them. It seems to be their favorite thing to do. This obviously, of course, would do a lot of damage to the communities that they profess to care about. Well, minimum wage would be the best, worst gift you could give someone. You would just be forcing a price on their labor that would make them unemployable. No one is going to hire someone with no training, education, or experience and pay them $15 an hour when that person hiring them is not receiving the same value in return. That may hurt your feelings, but that is how reality operates. And if you force them to hire them, that means higher prices for everyone, which in that case, you haven't alleviated any suffering. You've at best just spread it around. Or that business just can't keep up and they close up shop, and that's another opportunity gone, and that worker you wanted to help will now just be making the real minimum wage, which is $0 an hour. You have helped no one, and worse than that, you'll be patting yourself on the back over it. What Laffer is saying here is something that needs to be said. It's very important that people understand this, lest they advocate for a nice-sounding idea that ends up hurting people far more than it helps. Although there is one group I would like to mention that this federal $15 minimum wage would help, and that, of course, is the big mega corporations. As said on this little clip, McDonald's basically said $15 wage means more robots, less jobs, which is true. Guess who can afford the $15 minimum wage? It's the big corporations, the big businesses, because they're not going to really have to pay it that much because they'll just automate your job, and then you're out of a job, and no one's getting paid that much. And meanwhile, the smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses that can't afford that wage, well, they're just gone. No way they can compete with a big corporation that can afford such a costly federal regulation. They'll be fine. You and I and the small businesses around us, we won't be fine. The leftist types need to think this through. They need to understand reality. Hopefully they start understanding it before any of these policies actually become implemented, because I do not want to have to stand there and say I told you so, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to see the pain that this causes and use that pain as evidence of why they're wrong. I'd rather them just understand reality and how it works before they go down this ridiculous road. But anyway, that's all for now. Like, subscribe, comment. Please share this video. It's hugely helpful and very much appreciated. And take it easy.